It's the 28th of May. This is the Media Center Ukraine. My name is Svetlana Ninchiporenko, and we'll be talking today about the project of Inferno. It will be the presentation, and the task of this project is documenting of the conditions faced by Ukrainian POWs. The today's speakers are Synelnyk, the head of the staff of the First Corps of National Guard Azov, Oksana Gorbachova, the representative of the Ombudsman in the sector of defense and security, Oleh Hushchyn, representative of the Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of POWs, Yevheniia Synelnyk, representative of the Association of Azovstal Defenders' Families, Nestor Barchuk, representative of the International Cooperation Department of the First Corps of the Azov National Guard. Nestor will come to us after Arsen leaves, and Olena Belechkova, the coordinator of the families of POWs and missing persons of the Media Initiative for the Human Rights. Hello. Today we'll be speaking, in fact, about the important project which is accumulating in it all of the data about the detention centers of our POWs and civilian prisoners on the territory of Russian Federation and temporarily occupied territories. This is a unique project, in fact, which was able to collect a huge amount of information bit by bit out of the statements and witnesses and ex-POWs from other open and not that open sources. We'll be speaking about that, but first and foremost, I'd like to talk to Arsen. Arsen, you are the ex-POW. You have stayed in the middle of this awful system of tortures. So now, like anybody else, you know, like no one else, you know how important it is to talk about the crimes committed by Russian Federation at the national level and at the world level. So could you please tell, why do you think it's really important and why this project can help to highlight these atrocities? Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Thank you for the invitation, for the opportunity to express my opinion. I thank our partners and friends. So, my sign name is Lemko. As it was said, I'm the head of the headquarters of the First Corps of Azov. After the defense of Mariupol, according to the order of our Supreme Commander-in-Chief, were in captivity. So for 4 months, I was staying in Olenivka. But also, I witnessed, unfortunately, even was the participant of the tragedy in the barrack in Olenivka, where it was awful. The website, which was created by the guys and ladies, Inferno, right? It is translated from Latin as hell. And believe me, in Olenivka, in the barracks, where everybody was on fire, where guys were screaming and shouting, it was worse than hell. But it's a moment. It was for several hours. But unfortunately, our brothers in arms, our guys, our friends, our relatives are in captivity for the 3rd year already. And this website is one of the tools which shows the society, and not only of Ukraine, but of the world, how awful the conditions are, what atrocities and tortures are taking place there at Muscovy. We are really grateful to our friends who are every Sunday going to the strike to remember and remind about our prisoners, not only ours, but and the Ukrainians. We are grateful to the partners, international organizations, which are for more than 3 years supporting and remembering our guys and ladies. We are really grateful for that. And I would like to say one thing, that only together, uniting, as the whole world does, will be able to overcome this Muscovy. I'm saying how it is. And and other guys who are also present here who witnessed these atrocities and awful tortures. And again, thank you so much for your help. Thank you, Arsen. Yevheniia, The families of the defenders of Azovstal are doing everything possible and impossible so that they could collect information bit by bit about the POWs who are now on the territory of Russian Federation, who detained there illegally. And these efforts led to many different projects and events. The project we are talking here about today is really important and powerful. Could you please tell what's its relevance, what's its peculiarity, and how the idea of its creation emerged? Hello, everyone. Well, in fact, one of the ideas of this project has become the position of the families, the situation of the POW families who face the problems to find their close person and to get to know what conditions of life of this person are. And we as relatives are opening the whole universe for ourselves. It's not as good as we would like it to be, because we are revealing for ourselves the country and its territory is oversaturated with concentration camps, detention centers, and torture chambers. But we understand that it was not created yesterday or 3 years ago. It was done during the Soviet times and now in Russia. We had whole schools like KGB and their successors who were taught to torture and to kill the people who think in a different way. And the fact that what successors are doing with our POWs is what they're. So they are, in fact, punishing the dissidents. One of the parts of our project is in the interactive map of Russia and occupied territory, because we'd like to show the scale, that it's a targeted policy, not just some local initiative. So we'd like to show it to the whole world. And then Nestor will tell more about the project itself. Thank you, Nestor. Then I give the floor to you. Please join us on the stage. Nestor, good day to you here. So we'd like to get to know more about this project. Could we see it and understand how it looks? Just a moment. Good day. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your attention to this issue. So, the website of Inferno. We would like to show with this project the reality which our Ukrainian POWs are in Russian captivity, to show the tortures, the hunger, when they are deprived of medical care, how they are deprived of all of the rights which are foreseen by Geneva Convention on the treatment with POWs. As it was mentioned by Yevheniia, in fact, tortures are the targeted policy, the state policy of Russia. We know that there are certain guidelines which are spread in the detention centers where the POWs are held. And these guidelines and instructions define specifically which tortures are more efficient against the POWs. According to the UN data, more than 95%, I mean the monitoring mission of the UN, more than 95% of POWs from Ukraine are under tortures in Russian captivity. So we created this website, this project, to show the truth, to speak about that. We urge our colleagues, I know there are Ukrainian journalists here and foreign ones as well, the representatives of our international partners, we need to speak about that, to give the voice to those who are deprived of their voice now in Russian captivity, to give the voice for those who perished, who were murdered by Russians in Olenivka, and those who died in Russian jails because of tortures. With this website, we are systematizing and documenting the crimes against Ukrainian POWs in Russian captivity. And we've created the pages of each of the detention centers, every single colony. We will add information to this website. We'll add much more information about new detention centers. We'll fill it with the news. Every page and every site of the detention center has its chapters, overall information, tortures, medical care, and of course, all of that is according to the statements of the Ukrainian POWs. Now you can see the statements. Every quote is the statement from the person himself or herself. These people had to overcome electrocuting, beating, hunger. They were kept in the punishment cells. And you can see the map of Russian Federation and temporarily occupied territories on the background. Every red dot on the map is a detention center or a colony where the Ukrainian POWs are held. Unfortunately, these dots are much more numerous. Now the Ukrainians are held in hundreds of detention centers all over Russia. We will go on adding new points and dots on the map, new detention centers, unfortunately. At these pictures of Konstantin Liberov, you can see our POWs instantly after the exchange, those who went through the hell of Russian detention centers and colonies, those who we could bring back, but there are people who just now, at these moments, are under tortures. And also there are the ones who we'll never see alive, but the question is how long. Captivity kills. That's why we don't have the right to be silent. The mission of our project is to tell about the realities of Russian captivity, about the truth. And also, we urge you, all of the guests and presentees, please disseminate the information. For our international partners, I urge you to keep the topic of POWs in the international agenda. So the comeback of all of our POWs should be the compulsory and inseparable part of any future peace negotiations. And Russia should be taken to responsibility and liability for the crimes against POWs and not avoided. Nestor, who is this site for? And which languages will it be represented? It is now in Ukrainian and English. We are planning to expand the number of languages which we have in the website. It is for the Ukrainians, for the journalists, for the foreign journalists, for our international partners and friends, so that we could constantly remind about the truth and about the conditions of our POWs in Russia. Olena, the Media Initiative for the Human Rights, unfortunately, is often visiting the Media Center of Ukraine with such topics which are around the topics of POWs and tortures, which are now conducted by Russian Federation. So this project is also part of this huge global topic. So how does the Media Initiative for Human Rights has joined it? And how did the statement which your organization collected about the tortures and detention center, about the lack of medical care or any other assistance, has become the part of this website? Hello, everyone. The Media Initiative is actively communicating with the families and the unit of Azov. We are dealing with the documenting of war crimes. We are interviewing the liberated POWs, including Azov guys. As of today, we've interviewed approximately 30 Azov guys, including the ones who stayed in the Olenivka barrack, because the creation of the map history and the Media Initiative is implementing it itself. We are constantly filling our map with the new detention centers, understanding that those are not only POWs but civilians as well, because there are the category of sites which are temporary and some of them are permanent. So we need to understand that there can be centers where the convicted military are already staying in jail. So we don't know their specific number. And in the awful jails, there could be 1, 2, or dozens of those who were convicted, depending on the verdict and that sham court which was taking place. We've shared to create this map and the website. We shared the data about the list of the detention centers on the temporarily occupied areas and the territory of Russian Federation, according to the statements which we've collected from Azov guys who were interviewed. And this communication and sharing of information is conducted, in fact, on a permanent basis. We are always open for communication. And as they say, if it brings to outcomes, not only to make it known at the international level, but also to help our national law enforcement authorities. Because as of today, the media initiative is actively working in the sphere of sanctions lists on the detention centers. We understand that rather frequently the POWs do not see the faces of their torturers or the management of the colony or detention center. But through OSINT, through other means and capacities, we are identifying the people who were affiliated with that, first involved in that, first of all, the management, to collect this data and to give it to the national and international authorities. So the international attention is important. The media initiative has investigated and is investigating and collecting statements about the tragedy in Olenivka because the people who were freed from captivity, who were staying in that barrack, are important witnesses. Those are the victims who can provide their statement. And it's important to have this communication not only between the human rights activists, the communities of families, and the units and law enforcement authorities, because we have also the meetings when we get together and check the lists on Olenivka as well. Because as of today, we cannot specify surname by surname every person who was staying in that barrack. So the more freed or liberated POWs are, including the barrack 200, the more we'll have information and the opportunity to shape the cases, which will give the opportunity to take the perpetrators to liability. As for what is happening with Azov guys, those are awful tortures. So what was mentioned about the leaflets, the mechanisms which Russia is using about tortures against our POWs, the media initiative provided the analytical research about the destroying of the Ukrainian identity, comparing the experience of Soviet times and the methods of the use of these tortures are really similar. They are identical. Russians did not invent anything new. They're just making it worse. And as for Azov guys, they name them terrorists in Russia, a terrorist organization. So those court trials are taking place as well, violating the norms of the international law. And further on, it also deteriorates and makes it complicated to exchange them, because the convicts are now only in several exchanges. Those court trials are more numerous, and as for Azov guys, they hide the place of their detention. They conceal it, and about the information about where they stay and what's their current state. So the court trial gives us more information how they are, what's their current state. We even have the soldier who publicly mentioned and stated about the tortures. But there are some people who we don't know anything about. Even about one of the colonies where the so-called convicts are staying, the Azov guys are staying separately from the same convicts, POWs of different units. So that is why it is important to communicate with international partners and to use all of the possible mechanisms to visit the detention centers, to check the conditions of their stay there. And we understand it's not that always sufficient to work with ICRC, because they don't have access to detention center, and it doesn't lead to any active actions from them. So our organization goes on talking about the necessity to develop the development of the patroness country. I heard the skeptical view that it's hard to choose the country which will take so many obligations. But it's important to understand for Ukraine that we need to move along this direction, because the patroness country is confirmed not only by Ukraine, but what's important, by Russian Federation, and it will have the opportunity to have access not only to the detention center, but to take part in the court trials, to give the help of lawyers, to get the information about the missing persons. So it will be an important step to get these important data, both for Ukraine and for the relatives in particular. So we go on working and documenting war crimes. We are open for the communication and assistance to take to accountability the ones who are perpetrators, who are to blame for this, and to do everything possible to bring the POWs back, including the Azov guys. Thank you, Olena. I would like to go on with a conversation about the international response. Oksana from the Ombudsman Office, you're trying to communicate for the whole civilized world about the atrocities committed by Russia. Will this website help you in this work? And we've already mentioned today the RCRC. Well, there should be, at this website, there should be information from them. How does it respond to the attempts to communicate, to achieve them, to get access to the torture chambers which they created at the temporarily occupied territories? Hello, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to communicate today in such a team like here. I think it's worth mentioning that our office is created for control over the human rights and freedoms of the person, of a citizen, and on the treatment with POWs. Our office is conducting that work since the beginning of Russian aggression, that is since 2014. But undoubtedly, the latest 3 years, the depth and the limits of the human rights violation by Russia are just impossible to exceed. Our office is documenting every statement of ex-POW, of the both male and female, all of the information which is provided by the relatives, by civil society, any information which is taken from the open sources is registered, documented, analyzed, and used in the communication by us, both in the or authorities which are working between the states and also in the international arena. In particular, during the communication within the implementation of point 4 of the peace formula of our president, Volodymyr Zelensky, we invite the ex-POWs to provide statement for the international partners. We provide the ex-warriors of Azov who could personally tell to the international partners, the representatives of the international organizations and foreign states, how exactly Russia is not complying with the requirements which can be found in the international humanitarian law. The International Committee of Red Cross is the only humanitarian organization which is specifically mentioned in the Geneva Convention on the treatment with POWs. So, as for the communication, I cannot say it's easy, as they specifically are complying with their own principles. The principle of confidentiality, the principle of non-interference, and I think that those principles will interfere into the process of including their information to the website of Inferno. They don't spread, they don't disseminate, they don't tell. All of their communication is leading that you are the representatives of one of the parties of the conflict, and we are neutral. That is why we will not tell anything either to them or to you, if we have anything. We are communicating only with the families. However, the families also do not have the information. They don't have the information either about their relative or about their current health, and unfortunately, rather frequently, as it was already mentioned, whether they are still alive there. And it's an incredibly huge issue, because I can see here we see the Moscow Convention prepared, right, by the community of Azov. This is what's worth mentioning. Almost in each of the articles of the Third Geneva Convention, there is the contradiction which is implemented by the aggressor country. So all of the initiatives which are implemented by the society, by the relatives, by the media, anything undoubtedly leads to the use in our common case and affair, and is used to show, to illustrate, to demonstrate how exactly Russia is treating our defenders. In particular, the pictures which were shown today at the website of Inferno have been used in the communication of our president with President Trump, as we all remember that press conference. And all the information is useful in our common opportunity, attempt to show how exactly that party does not comply the requirements which they signed for. Thank you, Oksana. Oleh, the coordination headquarters is also communicating with the Western world, trying to push them to more active actions about our POWs. So during these 3 years, even more than 3 years of the full-scale invasion, has it become more complicated to communicate with the Western world? And did their response change? I wish health to all of you, and I will go on with the point of my colleague. You know, if the ICRC, which, according to the 3rd and the 4th Geneva Convention, should have access to all of the detention centers where the POWs are, and personally to each of them, but it cannot do that because of the position of Russian Federation, we will do that instead of them. And it is very nice to see that the information which is collected within the activity of our coordination headquarters, and it covers both the intelligence community and the law enforcement authorities and NGOs. We all have one and only objective: to bring back the POWs, to document all of the violations done by Russia, and the social legal protection for those who have come back and their relatives, the family members. And lots of the materials which you will see at this website are the consequence, very often, of non-public and sometimes not that grateful work of those which are trying with all of their ways and means to save our defenders and civilians. And you know, obviously I will pose a question to our foreign colleagues. How do you think, how many detention centers for Ukrainian POWs and civilians are there in Russia and in the occupied territories? 5, 10, maybe 20, maybe 100, 300. Ukraine has 5 camps for the POWs and 5 temporary detention centers. For all of them, there is totally free, without any obstacles, access for any human rights organizations, international institutions, and ICRC, UN, and so on. Russia has 300 of them, including the occupied territories and including the Republic of Belarus. And not a single one of them provides the access to them for ICRC or UN or OSCE or just human rights activists. And what you'll see, and again, I'm talking more to the foreign colleagues, what you will see is one of the biggest, most efficient ways to provide the truthful information to your societies, to your politicians. We understand perfectly that the process, which is named exchange or bilateral repatriation, is the consequence mostly of the political decisions, in particular in the Kremlin. And your pressure, the pressure of your political institutions over the aggressor state, will be based upon not just on your assumptions or ideas, but on what you will really see here. You will be able to document that, print that out, disseminate among your colleagues. Let me be frank. for the fourth year of the full-scale aggression. It frequently leads to the situation when our foreign partners and societies are beginning to be exhausted, just physically even. And rather often, when we bring the information which you will see on this website to them, they are amazed because they don't even remember what is taking place in Ukraine and on the territory of Russia and temporarily occupied territories, because the life is not stagnating. You understand what is going on in the world. The political issues are mostly decreasing the role and mission of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in their internal problems. So again, the problem exists. The problem so that the problematics of the Ukrainians in the captivity to be constantly in the agenda of the societies, of the politicians, the ones who are decision makers, the ones who influence the decision-making process. I urge all of you, mostly the foreign colleagues and partners and journalists, please do not forget about that. Disseminate, spread, even those QR codes. According to our experience, they are really efficient because they don't claim anything from you. Just one picture in your media will be able to prove and to bring this information to the huge number of people who maybe heard about something or maybe read about it just once a month in a newspaper or saw it on the TV, and that's it. Here they will be able to see with their own eyes all of the atrocities, all of those terrors which my colleagues mentioned, that the tortures are systematic as a policy of the aggressor state, not just some sporadic acts of separate jail owners. Thank you. Thank you, Oleh. Dear journalists, dear guests, if you've got any questions, please raise your hand. We'll give you the mic, and you will be able to pose your question. Yes, there is a question, please. Good day. Could you please could you comment on the latest huge exchange, 1,000 for 1,000, and the message that there were no Azov guys among the exchanged POWs? Why is that? Maybe they were in the Ukrainian list. Could you comment on that? Could you introduce yourself? Andrei Makarenko, Embassy of Germany. Thank you. I think that if there are similar questions, you should pose them instantly, and I will answer now. Do you have any other questions about the latest exchange? Yes, there is one. Good day. Anna Zhelezniak, Suspilne News. I have the question about the civilians, because we almost don't have any information about them. Were there the people from the Crimea among the exchanged, and the ones who were convicted from the temporarily occupied territories? 15 of them came back. Did you know that they will come back? And were there 15 of them, or maybe more? Thank you. Any other questions about the latest exchange to collect all of them? Not so far, so please, the answer. Those questions are not that simple, so the answers are not as well. Obviously, you will not like them. So several days ago, the official representative of the coordination headquarters, Andriy Yusov, already answered the questions about the obvious problematics of the latest exchange and the previous ones. The exchange which took place was a consequence of the political deal in Istanbul between this political deal and the fact not that many time has passed. Not that much time has passed. So you need to remember one thing. All of the exchanges which are taking place, not only this one, but all the ones, the previous ones, for Russian Federation, the people, their citizens don't matter anything in comparison with the Ukrainian party, which means that Russian Federation can and it will manipulate. It will always manipulate all of the exchange processes is one of the parts of the huge manipulation. But manipulation for whom? Who is the target of this manipulation? Ukrainian society is. So to start manipulating Ukrainian society, they need to create the situation when within the society there are questions to the Ukrainian authorities. Why is it like that? Why is it not like this? Why did it take place like this? Of course, we would all like, and we are doing everything possible. You do not see what we do, but we are doing everything possible for all of the Ukrainians, both civilians and POWs, to come back alive, intact. And the bodies of our perished who are staying at the battlefield could be brought back as well and given to the families. But they understand that. The Russians understand that. They understand that for Ukraine, a human being, one human being, is already a value. In contrast to Russia itself, let me repeat. So their hatred against our colleagues from Azov regiment is just something infernal. They hate as much as they can. They hate all of us and Azov guys even more. And they will use those exchanges, as the means to conduct pressure onto the Ukrainian society, just because they see that we are not silent. We are constantly keeping this topic of the comeback in the agenda for the society, in the media space. Let me repeat, you need to understand why it is taking place, why they are not brought back, or when they are brought back, they are not that numerous. Just for that. Does Ukraine do everything possible? Yes, it does. Always. It always. Absolutely. When the public or non-public communications with the Russian party is taking place, the bring back of our colleagues from Azov and others is in the agenda. No one is forgetting about anyone and is not silent about anyone. Thank you. There was a very specific question about the Crimean the Crimeans. As for the civilians, yes, please read again or listen to the interview with the representative of the coordination headquarters, Andriy Yusov. In particular, he said that the lists which were given to both sides were not, in fact, corrected. Maybe because we lacked time, or again, the Russian Federation is always manipulating those lists. He already mentioned that, so please read this interview or listen to it, which took place just several days ago. Thank you. Are there any other questions left? Maybe the foreign colleagues? There is a hand over there. Two clarifications. Could you please tell? Ukraine filed the suits to the courts about the violation of the rights of the POWs. Could you please tell more about that? So did you sue? Well, there are lots of courts, ICC and also the Hague court and the newly created, well, even not created so far, International Tribunal, which will be responsible for the taking to liability of Russian Federation for the aggression crime. In the context of ICC, yes, sure. There are certain processes and procedures on the liability of certain persons, not the state, in the ICC. And of course, there are cases of POWs there. There are also cases connected with the use of the universal jurisdiction principle, which means that the state which took the obligation to use the principle of universal, in this case criminal jurisdiction, has the obligation, according to the certain condition, if it is done accordingly, to open a criminal case against a Russian who tortures a Ukrainian. These cases also exist, both about on the territory of European states and also on the territory of Latin America. Yes, such cases exist, but let me repeat, they are about specific cases, about specific state officials or about specific types and forms and methods of tortures of certain Ukrainians. As this issue of public accusation but against a certain person, rather frequently they are not public till a certain procedural moment. We just know that they exist. Thank you. Yes, please. For us, it's especially painful to see the topic of the war crime in Olenivka. We know that from Ukraine, in particular the Media Initiative for Human Rights, we gave the materials to the ICC, and now the Prosecutor General of ICC, Karim Khan, is assessing these materials. It is very important for us so that the case of Olenivka either was investigated or became the part of some bigger case. That is why it's very important to have Ukrainian and, first of all, international attention to this case, which will be a kind of encouragement for the ICC or an incentive. It will emphasize the importance of this case. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions left? Then one more question from me, maybe to Oleh or Oksana, about the conditions of our POWs, how they live there, and treatment for them. Do you see any changes during these 3 years? Does it become more systematic and more cruel? Or maybe vice versa, the enemy is exhausted because of tortures? Well, it's a dichotomy answer. On the one side, my colleagues have already said that the Russians even have a special manual, a guideline, an instruction how to torture, with the types of tortures and expected consequences. So just to say that this activity stopped being systematic or targeted as a state policy, no, it is still like that. But still we can see certain cases which are not systematic so far, when the treatment for POWs and civilians is becoming better. It does not mean that the Russians are reading conventions, the fourth and the third one. No, they do not do that. But at least some improvement in food. Well, maybe they are not beaten that frequently, can be seen in some of the detention centers among these 300. And we assess these changes just because that this policy by Ukraine and our partners is not silenced. That this policy is the widely spread information among the world countries, at the international platforms, anywhere. We are talking about that. And this website, which you've seen today, we do hope, again, will drive attention, not only for the societies, but of the political circles who will be able to influence the Russian machine of murders and tortures. Let me repeat again, all of the tortures, whatever is taking place in the detention centers, all of that is done and ordered by the top commanders. Those are not sporadic acts by certain people. Oksana, please. I agree with my colleague, really. There are separate cases, separate pieces of information that in some of the detention centers there was an improvement of the conditions and attitude, treatment, but still it's not systematic and it's not stable. One of the factors, and I agree with Oleh, is that we are not silencing that. Our society is not silent about that. We are making people aware, both at the state level and the civil society does that, the media do that. Undoubtedly, each of these steps is one of the bricks of our overall awareness campaign and systematicity of such treatment. And one more maybe mechanism which has certain positive consequences is communication between the ombudsman, our Dmitro, and Moskalkova, Tetyana Moskalkova. According to the statements of the freed POWs, they tell that really, before her arrival, after the statement of our ombudsman, before she arrived, the conditions are improving. The food is improved a bit. Even it is becoming more diverse and better, fuller. Really, they don't beat that much. In some of the detention centers, this effect is going on for some time. However, we cannot say that it's systematic and permanent. So far, we cannot say that. Thank you, Olena, please. I would like to add whether it changed or not. When we collect the statements of the freed POWs, we need to understand that when there is a court trial about the military, about the soldier, the Russian Federation will use all of the possible mechanisms to force the soldier to confess what he never did. And we can see in the practical part on the court trials which are taking place in Rostov, when the military does not confess in what he is accused of, he is sent for the re-upbringing, so-called re-upbringing to the detention center in Taganrog, to the torture chambers. The most awful things are taking place there. And the Azov guys who were liberated say that after what they do to you, you will confess in anything, that you killed 10, 20, 50 people. One of the guys confessed that he killed 150 humans. He was ready to sign under anything, just not to be tortured anymore. And after this sham court gives a verdict and the guys are sent to the penitentiary centers, there we understand that physical violence mostly is not taking place. This could be some moral pressure, some improper conditions about food and all the rest, but the physical force is not used because they already achieved their objective. They put a tick on the proper verdict for them, and then they are not interested in these people, but these people are sent to the most awful jails. As for what just Oksana said, the exchange, the necessity to visit the detention centers of the representatives of the ombudsman, according to the statements of the guys, they say that when Moskalkova visits them or her representatives do, the conditions are improving for some time. But if we look at some minimal statistics, maybe the visit of the representatives of Moskalkova will be more numerous than the visits of the representatives of ICRC, at least according to the statements of the guys who talked about that. If we look at this tendency and compare it, obviously at the temporarily occupied territories, in the places where rather frequently we know that there can be POWs in Luhansk region, Sukhodolsk, Svetlov colonies, the conditions, if we may say, are lighter in comparison with the detention centers in Russian Federation. And Russian Federation, for them, the hardest for the military is to get to the detention center on the territory of Russia. So obviously there are certain improvements, and some of the guys said that before the exchange, without even knowing that they will be exchanged, the conditions were improving, but not for them. They increased even the amount of food. It's the broiler principle. They fed more, but it's not that useful for the body, for the person. So Russia is trying to speed up the process, showing that they were not in the awful state when they are coming back. But unfortunately, we understand that when they stay in the captivity for 2 or 3 years, even if you feed the person for a month, the person will not be like he or she used to be before the captivity. So the improvement can take place when they are visited. As for the convicted, we say that the physical and cruel tortures stop, But obviously they go on with violating other norms of international humanitarian law. Yes, a short remark from me. You've mentioned ICRC and the issues with it, with this authority. Really, ICRC has access to all of the Russian POWs on the territory of Ukraine, but they do not have access to the Ukrainian POWs at the temporarily occupied territories or in Russia. Maybe they have access only to some number of them, but Russia gives the opportunity for the ICRC to say that, so that they could say that we are doing something. But they take this convenient position saying, well, at least we are doing something. And we are moving on in tiny steps, but at least we are moving. This is the issue with this international tool or mechanism of ICRC. Another issue is finding out the circumstances on Olenivka barrack. The Secretary General Guterres has created a mission, and this mission, instantly after the terrorist act, existed only for several months. It never came to Ukraine. It was not able to get to the territory of Olenivka, because obviously it was not granted access, and then it was just disassembled. So there is a question about the composition of this commission, because it included the people who were sympathizers of Russia, obviously. And our ombudsman also mentioned about that. But those two cases of ICRC and the UN mission are all the bits of the puzzle, of the bigger picture. As of now, the security architecture, the architecture of the international humanitarian law which we have now, it was created after World War II, and it foresees that both sides in the war are complying with IHL. But what do we do if in the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russia, whatever they have in the Security Council of UN, they are openly ignoring that, without even hiding that. They violate the IHL, international humanitarian law, but still they are waving into your face with their nukes. The civilized world doesn't have a response what to do in such a case, and we need to find such a response. Otherwise, we understand that the architecture which exists now is just not working. We can see it. We see the people on the pictures, and we understand that the people, for instance, Azov guys, for 3 years already after they leave Azovstal, are still staying in captivity. We can just imagine what the conditions they are kept in. Thank you. Oh, there is one more question. Please give the mic. The question will be in English, so if you need an interpretation, please use the headsets. Microphone, please.
It is reported back in 2022 in Istanbul peace talk, Russia's condition is Ukraine drop all international litigation against Russia. I just wondering, they laid the same condition in the latest talk in Istanbul, or do you have any condition from them like that, from America? And one more question, the latest exchange in Chernihiv, I know there's 120 civilians, and then we maybe all waited in the same hospital, but those 120 civilians didn't come there. I just wondering why you differentiate all soldiers and civilians back then. Thank you.
Thank you. Хто готовий відповісти?
Thank you. Who is ready to answer? Microphone, please.
In 2022, Russia demands Ukraine drop all international litigation against Russia. This is their condition for peace talk. I just wondering, they raise the same issue. Ukraine should don't sue international court again. I mean, in the latest talk in Istanbul, or is there any message from this issue is raised in the negotiation between America and Russia?
I'm not sure I can comment on the negotiations of Ukraine and Russia. Maybe my colleagues will be able to answer. I don't think that it is done within our mandate, and specifically the topic which we were discussing today? I do apologize. I'm not sure I can answer this question. We have a bit of a different level of conversation. We do apologize for that. Are there any other questions left about today's topic? No questions left, so I thank our guests. Oh, there is a question. I do apologize. Please, will you need the mic? A clarification. As for this website, it has been launched and accessible today, or did it work before? We published it just recently, several days ago. It's a new product, and we published it now. And we are planning to develop it further on, to fill it in and up with the new information, news. Thank you. Thank you, all of you who have joined the creation of this product. It's really important, and I'd like to emphasize, even if today we heard the words that episodically and symptomatically the conditions for our POWs are becoming lighter, it does not mean that the situation has improved, and we need to speak and disseminate the truth, including this project, Inferno, which we presented today. Thank you so much. The Media Center Ukraine will go on its work at 2 p.m. We'll be speaking about global economic problems and the changes for Ukraine after the end of the trade non-visa regimen with the EU and new U.S. tariff policies.